The night before her wedding, she uncovered a secret that shattered everything. But instead of walking away quietly, she chose to expose the truth right at the altar in front of 200 stunned guests and a groom who never saw it coming. What followed wasn't just a broken engagement, but the unraveling of a powerful empire and the rise of a woman who turned betrayal into a mission. What would drive a bride to burn it all down? And how did that one decision change the course of her life? And so many others forever. I always thought the night before my wedding would be full of butterflies, champagne, and sentimental tears. I never imagined it would be the night my world cracked open, and that I would be the one holding the hammer. We were the couple everyone envied. Richard Caldwell, the charming heir to a billion-dollar empire, and me, Sophia Bennett, the orphan-turned-philanthropist with a storybook romance. His mother, Eleanor, had practically adopted me. His sister, Claire, was the maid of honor and the best friend I never had. Everything was perfect, or so I thought. That night, I wasn't supposed to leave the apartment. My nails were freshly done, my veil steamed my vows, printed in cursive on ivory linen paper. But I realized somewhat stupidly that I had forgotten to give Richard the cufflinks. Not just any cufflinks, but the antique ones passed down from his grandfather. Eleanor had insisted he wear them. Family legacy, she said. Tradition. So I grabbed the velvet box and decided to drop by the Grand Wyndham Hotel just 2 blocks down from our penthouse. That's where Richard and his groomsmen were holding the bachelor dinner in a private suite. It wasn't wild, he'd promised me that. Just whiskey steak and some war stories he'd said with a wink. I didn't call ahead. The hotel staff knew me well from our fundraising galas. One of the concierges smiled and led me straight to the private lounge. And that's when I heard it, a burst of laughter. His laugh. Unmistakable. Then a voice, Jason Miller, his best friend since prep school. Come on, man, you're not seriously thinking of settling down with her, are you? My hand froze on the doorknob. Then Richard's voice, thick with whiskey. She's perfect on paper. The trust fund game changer. And she worships me. Makes things easy. More laughter. She's temporary anyway. Just until someone better comes along. I couldn't breathe. Just like that, 3 years of memories shattered like a dropped glass on marble tile. Every whispered, I love you. Every late-night phone call, every canceled dinner, all of it flipped inside out. I stood there like a ghost, clutching the box of cufflinks like it could anchor me to reality. But I didn't cry. Not yet. Something colder than grief took over. Something sharper. I walked away quietly. No confrontation. Not yet. Back in our penthouse, I opened my laptop. Because you see, Richard and I weren't just a couple. I was also his silent partner in Caldwell Enterprises. I had access to the inner walls of his kingdom, passwords, accounts, corporate records, emails. By sunrise, I had uncovered more than I bargained for. Foreign bank transfers, skimmed investor funds, confidential emails between Richard and Rebecca Lawson, a board member and apparently his mistress. Plans for after the honeymoon, merging companies, liquidating assets, replacing me. I could have vanished quietly, left him disappeared, let him wonder why I never showed up at the altar. But I didn't. Instead, I decided to show up in white on time, with the truth in my hands, and watch him burn. The morning of the wedding, the suite was buzzing. Bridesmaids in satin champagne dresses fluttered like butterflies around me. Hairspray mist in the air, lipstick touch-ups, sparkling Prosecco and flutes. But my hands steady as steel. The envelope of evidence sat beneath a silk wrap in my luggage, hidden but heavy, like a second heart beating in my suitcase. Eleanor burst in with her usual sparkle, holding my bouquet white peonies and blush roses. They're perfect, she beamed. You're perfect. I almost believed her. Claire adjusted my veil behind me, her eyes misty. I can't believe my brother got this lucky, she whispered. I looked at her in the mirror. She was glowing, so full of joy, so unsuspecting, if she only knew. I smiled, not out of happiness, but control. I had rehearsed that smile. At 11:40 a.m., my phone buzzed. Additional evidence secured, press in position, law enforcement standing by. I exhaled, walked to the restroom, and locked the door. More screenshots, more damning files, money laundering, insider trading, a house of cards dressed in tuxedos and glossy smiles. I looked at my reflection, My red lipstick was flawless. My dress fit like armor. I didn't look like a bride. I looked like a reckoning. Back outside, Eleanor clipped a string of family pearls around my neck. These belonged to Richard's grandmother. She wore them at her wedding, she said softly. I nodded, whispering, "Thank you." But inside I was screaming. Those pearls were about to witness the collapse of their dynasty. By noon I was standing alone at the grand wooden doors of the cathedral. My bridesmaids had gone ahead. The string quartet played the wedding march, Pachelbel's canon, the one we picked together on a rainy Sunday. My cue. I slipped the envelope into the hidden pocket sewn into my gown. The coordinator smiled. "Ready, Miss Bennett?" I nodded, and with that I stepped forward. Each step was a countdown, each breath a final page. The whispers from the guests, "She's stunning, what a dress," felt like barbs. At the altar, Richard stood beaming. No clue. 2 steps away, I caught Jason's eyes. He looked away, guilty. Rebecca sat front row in a navy blue gown, paid for with stolen money. Eleanor wiped tears from her eyes. Claire bounced excitedly. Richard reached out his hand. "You look breathtaking," he whispered. I didn't take his hand. I turned to the crowd, slowly pulled the envelope from my gown. "I'd like to begin," I said, by sharing a few readings, not from scripture, from emails, gasps, silence. Then, "My dearest Rebecca," I began, my voice steady. "Once Sophia's trust becomes accessible, the merger goes through. She'll never see it coming." Richard turned white, and I smiled for the first time that day. What would you have done in my shoes? Walked away silently, or exposed everything like I did? The silence that followed my words felt like a thunderclap. Every eye was on me. Richard's smile had vanished, his hand still hanging midair unanswered. I watched the blood drain from his face as I unfolded the next email. The weight of every lie he'd ever told now crashing down on him with each sentence I read aloud. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Jason looked like he wanted to crawl under the pew. And Eleanor, dear sweet Eleanor, froze mid-breath, the handkerchief clutched in her lap, trembling. I could feel the confusion growing in the room. The whispers started as a ripple, then swelled into a wave. I raised my voice just enough to cut through it. "I have more," I said. "Emails, wire transfers, offshore accounts. And if any of you are wondering whether this is real, the church doors opened. 2 federal agents in dark suits stepped in quietly, respectfully. They weren't here for drama. They were here for facts, for justice." Richard took 1 step toward me, hand outstretched like he could still talk his way out of this. "Sophia, please. Can we talk in private? Just us." I stepped back before he could touch me. "You want to talk?" I said, my voice sharp. "Let's talk about what you said at your bachelor party, about me being temporary, about waiting for someone better to come along. Let's talk about how you planned to take everything I had and leave me with nothing but a ring and a ruined name." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I turned to the crowd. Dozens of families would have lost everything if this wedding went through. His merger would have wiped out pension savings homes. But hey, at least the flowers were perfect, right? Rebecca tried to slip out quietly. She didn't make it far. The second team of agents was waiting outside. I handed the folder to the lead officer, stepping away from the altar like it was a crime scene, which in truth it was. Richard's voice cracked as he tried one last time. "Sophia, I loved you in my own way." I turned back to face him, my voice low but cutting. "Your way was using people, manipulating them, building an empire out of secrets and pretty lies. That's not love. That's cowardice in a tailored suit." Eleanor stood, her face pale and stunned. "Richard," she said softly, "what have you done?" He looked at her, broken now. "Mom, I can explain." "Don't," she said, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. "I don't want your words. I want the truth." That was the last thing he could offer her. The agent stepped forward. He didn't resist. The man who walked into the church with a designer tuxedo and a rehearsed smile was now being let out in handcuffs, cameras clicking like fireworks around him. The guests were too stunned to leave. Some stayed seated, others whispered, some even cried. But I didn't look back. I walked down the aisle alone. Not a bride, not a victim. Something else entirely. Outside, reporters swarmed, Microphones, cameras, questions I wasn't ready to answer. But I paused anyway. Because if you blow up your life this publicly, you owe people the ending. No comment, I said. The evidence speaks for itself. But I do have one message. I looked directly into the lens. Sometimes the truth doesn't wait for a perfect moment. Sometimes it crashes your wedding and rewrites your entire life. Don't ever ignore the feeling that something's off. Trust your gut, even if it hurts. Later that day, I sat on the edge of my hotel bed, still in my gown, still wearing the pearls. I stared out over the skyline, heart heavy and light all at once. Claire called 3 times. Eleanor left a voicemail. I didn't answer either. Not yet. Not because I didn't care, but because I needed a moment to remember who I was before all of this. And then I did something unexpected. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I had survived it. Because I had taken the biggest lie of my life and turned it into the most honest decision I'd ever made. Over the next few weeks, the headlines exploded. Heiress exposes groom at altar. Wedding turns into corporate sting. Caldwell Empire in crisis. The media loved the scandal, but under the noise, something else happened. People reached out, strangers, women, even former employees of Caldwell Enterprises. They wrote me letters, emails, DMs, thanking me, telling me I wasn't alone, that they had felt stuck, trapped, fooled by someone who looked perfect on the outside. I became something I never expected to be, a mirror, a warning, a voice, and somehow that helped me heal. I moved out of the penthouse, rented a small loft across from Central Park, somewhere humble, somewhere real, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to perform for anyone. Eleanor showed up at my door 3 days after the wedding. She was holding the velvet box with the family pearls. Her eyes were red, but her spine was straight. These belong to you now, she said. I shook my head. No, they belong to the past. She smiled through the pain. You expose the truth. That makes you more of a Caldwell than anyone ever has been. We drank tea in silence, and for the first time I saw her not as my almost mother-in-law, but as a woman who had lost a son, but perhaps found something else in the ashes. A year had passed since I walked away from that altar, not as a runaway bride, but as a woman who refused to marry a lie. The story should have ended there, but it didn't, because truth has a way of echoing. After the scandal, Veritas Consulting, my small idea born in the ashes of betrayal, exploded into something real. We weren't just cleaning up messes for corporations. We were helping rebuild the culture of accountability from the ground up. CEOs who once rolled their eyes at ethics were now leaning forward, asking for training, rewrites of codes of conduct, private sessions behind closed doors. And while the firm grew, so did something else. Me. I moved out of the penthouse with its cold marble floors and echoing silence. Instead, I chose a modest loft overlooking Central Park. No staff, no elevator operator calling me ma'am, just me, my laptop, a bookshelf full of cases, and a new version of freedom. Claire visited often. Our friendship, once fractured by shared grief and betrayal, had become stronger, more honest. She'd taken over a portion of Caldwell Enterprises, what was left of it after the legal storm, and was rebranding the entire operation. I watched her grow from Richard's little sister into a woman with vision fire and her own name on the letterhead. But perhaps the most unexpected turn came from Eleanor. 3 weeks after the wedding that wasn't, she knocked on my door with a gift-wrapped box in hand. Inside were the Caldwell pearls, the same ones she had fastened around my neck before everything came undone. I know you don't want these, she said, but they belong with the truth now, not with history. She sat across from me, hands trembling, as she cradled a cup of tea I'd made her. Her voice cracked only once when she said, "You did what none of us had the strength to do, and somehow you've given this family a second chance even after he burned it to the ground." She joined the board of my foundation shortly after. Together, we launched scholarship programs for women studying business ethics. I gave lectures at universities. Eleanor used her old money network to spread a new message. The era of charming frauds and tailored suits was over. And then came Mark. Dr. Mark Anderson, ethics professor at NYU, the man who first invited me to speak at his class. He didn't flirt. He didn't chase. He simply listened, observed, and waited. What began as post-lecture coffee turned into quiet dinners, long walks, shared silences. Mark wasn't flashy. He didn't fill a room. But when he looked at me, he saw me not the scandal, not the headlines, not the woman who burned down a wedding for justice. Just me. I didn't trust it at first. I kept waiting for the moment he'd show his real face. But it never came. There were no masks, no power plays. Just a man who believed that doing the right thing was never optional. A man who knew the cost of truth and respected those willing to pay it. One night after a particularly long day of consulting with a multinational on a corruption probe, I found a handwritten note slipped under my door. It was from Mark. It read, "You don't need a fairy tale. You need a fireproof kind of love. I don't want to rescue you. I want to walk beside you." I cried, not because I was broken, but because someone had finally seen the strength in my scars. 2 years after the altar fell apart, I said yes again. This time the wedding was different. No cathedral, no aisle lined with investors and socialites. Just a quiet ceremony in the botanical gardens where Mark and I used to walk and plan our curriculum updates over stolen kisses. Only 30 guests. Claire was my maid of honor. Eleanor gave a heartfelt speech that left half the room in tears. I wore a soft ivory gown, no veil, no pearls. Instead, I wore a simple silver necklace with one word engraved inside: truth. Mark's vows were not about possession, but about partnership. "I don't promise to protect you from storms," he said. "I promise to be your shelter through them." And for the first time in years, I felt safe. Not because someone would catch me, but because I knew I could stand even if I fell again. A few months later, our daughter was born. We named her Grace. She came into the world quietly, eyes wide and calm, like she already knew something the rest of us hadn't figured out yet. Sometimes I watch her sleep and wonder what stories she'll grow up hearing, what version of love she'll learn to believe in. I hope I teach her that love isn't a fairy tale and it isn't perfect. It's earned, honest, and sometimes built from ruins. Richard never contacted me, but I heard through Claire that he'd changed at least as much as anyone can in prison. He was mentoring other inmates using his story as a warning. He'd declined corporate offers that would have made him rich again upon release. That surprised me. But what surprised me more was how I didn't need his apology. His regret wasn't my redemption. Mine came long ago when I chose to expose the lie, and in doing so discovered the truth of who I was. Years passed. Our foundation expanded globally. Veritas became a name associated not with scandal, but with reform. I gave talks in London, Berlin, Toronto. Students lined up after each one asking not just about my story, but how to spot the warning signs in their own lives, how to stand up when it hurts most. One day as I finished a keynote at Harvard Business School, I spotted Mark in the crowd holding our daughter. She waved at me, chubby fingers stretched high. And I thought to myself, this is it. This is the real legacy. Not the pearls, not the empire, not even the courtroom drama. It's this, the family we built on truth. That night as we walked through the city, Grace asleep in Mark's arms, I told him something I hadn't said aloud before. You know, sometimes I think the best revenge wasn't what I did at that altar. He looked over, brow raised. It's this, I said softly. This quiet, beautiful life that no one can take from me. So now if you're watching this and you've made it all the way here, I want to ask you something. Do you believe some heartbreaks happen not to break us, but to rebuild us stronger? Do you think we sometimes meet the wrong person just to learn how to choose the right one? If this story touched you, comment 100 below. Let me know what country you're watching from. And if you believe someone out there might need to hear this, someone standing at the edge of a decision that could change everything, share this video with them. Because the truth may not always be easy, but it is always worth it.